Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Broken Families, where we host conversations on divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict relationships. My name is Andrew Folkler.
And I'm Barbara Pointe. Today, we are going to discuss how to prepare and organize your documentation for divorce. And to help us really dive deep into this topic, we've invited Carrie Gour, CEO and co-founder of PowerSwitch. PowerSwitch is an Android app that helps you save all relevant email, conversations, text messages into one little PDF that you can use in your divorce. So without further ado, welcome Carrie to Broken Families podcast.
Welcome.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Andrew.
So great that you're here. I think we better start at the basics and maybe just tell us why PowerSwitch and what is it?
PowerSwitch is the result of me really trying to solve my own problems in my own high conflict separation. So one of the kind of characteristics of a high conflict personality is that they communicate via multiple channels at high volume. And it's really a way that they destabilize the other person by constantly being kind of present and alive. So when I first left my ex, it sounds crazy, and it was, but I received 40 to 50 text message, emails, and phone calls every day, not for weeks, not for months, but what went on ultimately for more than a year. And then periodically that volume for years after that. This is not unusual. And for anybody in this situation, they're advised by their legal counsel, by their therapist, by sometimes a mediator or a parenting coordinator if they're involved, to document all of those communications so that you have a record of what's transpired to help support your case. It's also not unusual in high conflict divorce or separations for police to be involved. And so in that case, you also need this kind of evidence. So needless to say, when I left with two, my children were 3 years old. I had twin 3-year-olds. I was trying to work. I'm dealing with the emotional fallout of this impossible separation. And then just the onslaught of that. You cannot take that many screenshots. You just can't. And so your results, your sort of legal results, are in sort of direct proportion to the quality of the evidence that you have to support your claims. I documented kind of badly, which means sporadically. I took kind of a highlight reel of badness and got really poor results as a result of having poor evidence. And I just thought, what would make a difference for me? And I thought, what if all this documenting was automated? And so that's PowerSwitch. So PowerSwitch, and it actually is for Android and iPhone. We have it for both platforms. And it will collect and consolidate your text and your emails for as far back as you have them. We've done as much as 10 years for people, and puts them all in, like you say, a single searchable PDF. So now anyone you can search, you can highlight, you can annotate, years worth of conversations between you and as many people as you need. So again, in high conflict, it's not unusual for your high conflict personality to enlist other people to harass you. So yeah, so it might be your ex and their sister and their mother and their best friend or whatever. So you can collect all of that.
I mean, go ahead, Andrew. Sorry.
It sounds like it has a built-in feature that it can backtrack through already, sent and collected emails then, or collected text messages. Does it only work from once you got it installed and then it starts tracking it?
No, so it does both. So it
Okay.
goes from the time of sign up forward, but it also collects historically. So for some people who have, this high conflict situation in their lives, like we have pulled communications off 4 devices over 10 years because people are afraid to get rid of their phone because they don't want to lose those communications in case they need them. So for example, so PowerSwitch is 2 years old, and like I say, I created it wishing that it was the product that existed when I needed it. Well, because I'm in a high conflict separation, again, sort of the fundamental nature is that they kind of never end. So I'm now 6 years on, and there's a saying in technology, when a founder uses their own product, it's called eating your own dog food. Well, I ate my own dog food as recently as 2 weeks ago. So, so my experience was that my lawyer wanted to prove a pattern of behavior over time. And this is where PowerSwitch was like, I had that experience that we hear our customers have all the time, which is like, oh my God, thank God. Because I pulled 4 years of texts and emails, and then was able to, I highlighted and annotated all of that so that my lawyer could just quickly see what was going on over the last 4 years. And we made a finally kind of a conclusive argument about these are not sort of one-off crazy events on his part, that it's a regular sort of cadence of kind of abuse and harassment. That then, of course, has direct impacts on the kids and on me, and
So there's a lot of benefits I can see that we're going to talk about, but I have to imagine that this saved you a lot of money with your lawyer. Does it save you money to use your app with your family lawyer?
Yeah, so this is something that people wouldn't know until they've sort of been in the system for a bit, because you don't know. And here's the thing, most of us, even if we have this sort of high conflict person in our lives, when we divorce them, we're optimistic. We think, oh, finally, the hardest thing has happened and I have left this person and it's all going to be resolved soon. And I know they care a lot about money, but you know what? I'm gonna give them all their money and it's all just gonna be resolved. But that is not the nature of a high conflict person. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Oh, you're preaching to the choir here. That's true.
Yeah. So when you're optimistic, you don't know that you're going to be in this for years to come. So the way it saves you money is that in the beginning, when you're optimistic, you just want to pay your lawyer to take care of things. And the lawyer, their team, their paralegal and legal assistant, they do all of the work that PowerSwitch does. So you send them screenshots and you send them your email forwards, and then they put them in a time sequence. They are looking for that pattern of behavior over time. They're chasing you maybe for, well, what was the conversation before this and after this, so that they have some context. We have had customers who've said they've spent over $10,000 just for this piece. That's not for legal advice. That's just for the legal team to do what PowerSwitch can do in like half an hour. So in my case, because I did all that work, I supplied the PowerSwitch reports, and then I highlighted so that he didn't have to read 600 pages of texts and emails. And then I had little notes, right? Because you can annotate on this PDF, so that there was some context that connected to sort of the timeline of events that I had also created. Like, it didn't cost me anything in paralegal time. So at $175 an hour, that adds up fast.
But when you were getting those 30 to 40 texts per day and doing this documentation yourself for your lawyer, I have to imagine you were exhausted.
So it's a couple of things, right? So yes, so when we have surveyed our customers, they have told us that they spend an average, and these are people who have been in their high conflict sort of journey for 3 to 5 years on average, sometimes more, sometimes less, but they spend an average of 5 hours a week just sort of dealing with the documenting of stuff. So yes, so that's exhausting, just the physical labor, but it's actually the emotional piece that's the most exhausting, because there's sort of being constantly triggered by the ding of your phone. And then there's being re-triggered by having to scroll back and capture stuff constantly. And then you're either printing it out or you're sending it to your lawyer with some, whatever the story is. So you're constantly having to sort of be in it. And that's really emotionally exhausting. So this is the other great thing, right? So PowerSwitch will just collect it. You go through it once, you send it off. It's done. And the other thing is that when you're dealing with a lawyer, you're charged for every email that you send, right? It might be $50 an email. So if you're sending texts and are rather screenshots and email forwards, you're being charged every time you send that. If you send one with an attachment, like there's savings there too.
That's significant savings. I mean, don't you think sometimes when you're the recipient of all those letters or texts or emails, 10, 20, 30, 40 a day, don't you think sometimes you feel like, oh, like stop running my lawyer bill up?
So again, there are some generalizations in this high conflict space. One of the generalizations is that typically there's an inverse power dynamic, and it's either power and money. That's typically what it is. I'll just talk about my own experience. So, which is, I think, kind of prototypical. So my ex is, he's very wealthy and he's very important. He's very fancy. In these kinds of situations, this is not an unusual kind of dynamic. I think that litigation and financial abuse is rampant. And what I mean by that is because he has money and I comparatively don't,
Right.
He's constantly filing court motions, right? And we're on this kind of litigation hamster wheel that I'm constantly trying to get off, but there's this kind of pull to be on. So yes, I do feel like stop running up my lawyer bill. But I think from his perspective, that's part of the point.
Right. Right. Well, those high conflict personalities, we call them frequent filers.
Right.
Filers.
Right. Yeah. If only you could get points for that. Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So this sounds like a miracle app.
It is if you're somebody who needs mobile evidence to support your claims. Yeah. And really for us, like most of our customers, not most, is that fair? The majority of our customers are using PowerSwitch for changing parenting orders, that sort of thing. Because they, like I said, they're sort of in it now they've been in it for 3, 4, 5 years. So.
Right. And when you collect better digital evidence, as you say, and you get those better outcomes, do you also maybe at times get better court orders because you've had those better digital evidence experiences?
Yeah, I mean, better evidence does get you better outcomes for sure, because what happens a lot in all family court is he said, she said. So we're, if it's you and I, we're recalling a situation differently. And this becomes very kind of untenable. And then a judge kind of makes a decision based on kind of what he or she thinks often. or what he's, on the evidence that's presented, which might just be each person's version of events. When you have this, and this is part of the value proposition, I guess, of PowerSwitch, is because you're getting this comprehensive history, it's objective. And what I mean by that is, so it often happens that we too behave badly because it's like, oh my God, I am losing my mind, and just like, stop it already. And so maybe you say things that you kind of regret later, but that can actually help you. So it's embarrassing on the one hand. On the other hand, in the context, it's like, well, who wouldn't lose their mind? And then it's defensible if it's, if opposing counsel brings this thing up. It's like, yeah, well, you can defend it because it's there. But certainly I would say the objectivity in this comprehensive sort of nature, because you have all the context, is really helpful in getting better results. What I can say when I was collecting manually with screenshots in the beginning is that his counsel successfully made the argument that I was cherry picking to kind of frame him in a poor light because I didn't have everything.
Right. Yeah.
And so, which was not true. I just could not conceivably keep up.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of work.
Well, have you been there?
Just about, yeah.
Yeah.
Hours and hours of day, and your office is full of papers, and it's,
right.
It's overwhelming. So I also wish I would have known about this app back when it might have so served my situation. But what do you think about all this, Andrew?
I mean, it's something I can relate to. Granted, I haven't been in a divorce with a partner, but I have gone through the divorce process with my dad, and having to help him with all the documentation and the back and forth and the reading and rereading affidavits and suggesting edits and all that. And it's just it like you were saying earlier, Carrie, how emotionally taxing it is. And then I can't even imagine just being bombarded on top of that with hateful and spiteful messages from an ex, and it can, which honestly is probably intended to push you over the edge, because we've discussed in previous episodes, especially on high conflict personalities, how these people are often trying to take over and change the narrative and show that they're somebody to be admired and in a very narcissistic light, and that they're also looking to instigate conflict and then blame you for it. So I wholeheartedly agree with you, Carrie.
Yeah, no, and you're totally right. I do think it's intentionally destabilizing. And the other thing is that the very nature of a high conflict personality is that they're not emotionally regulated. So it's just like fireworks all the time, not in a good way.
Yeah, this app can really help you sort of take back your control on the post-separation abuse that occurs so often. I was just wondering how counsel and how family lawyers feel about your app.
Yeah, so I just want to pick up on something you said, which is about taking back the power. That's where our name, right? It's right there. It's like switch the power dynamic, take some power back. And so, yes, we're selling sort of technology, but really what we're selling is sort of power back to people who feel they've lost it, and control to people who feel like they have none, because you really feel like you're out of control when you're in this situation. But in response to your question about how counsel feels, like the ones that are using it and recommending it for their clients, they have said it's a game changer for their practice. Now, these are lawyers who have a high degree of what I would say client integrity, meaning they care about saving their clients money and that their clients are paying for their legal expertise and not for their administration abilities.
Yeah.
But as lawyers with better evidence, they also get better results. And so if they can get better results faster for less money for their clients, which is what is happening, that turns into this kind of, I refer to it as this virtuous business development cycle, because happy clients refer other clients and they remain clients.
Right. That's a really win-win-win, win-win for everyone.
I imagine then PowerSwitch can help a great deal for people who are self-representing as well.
Yeah, so we actually met with the chair of the Access to Justice Committee for the Canadian Bar Association, because, and they are the association that supports self-represented litigants, because they really see PowerSwitch as an access to justice tool, because a lot of self-represented cases fall apart because of evidence that is either poorly captured or poorly presented. So we solve for that. Because people can pull this history and then just search for what they need and be able to present it in a way that's easily consumable by a judge.
That's incredible. I mean, something else that's popping into my mind is when you're self-represented, you could even be more overwhelmed with the sheer volume of paperwork that you have to do and organize. And I really think I'm just supposing some women at some point must just feel like, I give up, like I just can't keep up with the documentation. It's just can be so overwhelming, and maybe even more so if you were self-represented.
Yeah, so I think when you're self-representing, it's overwhelming because you're not just learning how to document your evidence, say, you're also having to learn legal process and court protocol, and you're reading case law, and right, it's like this, it's a lot. And you're dealing with this really difficult person in your life on top of that, who probably has paid for representation often. Yeah, it's a lot. So a really great sort of mid ground is people are going to legal coaching, or what's called sort of unbundled services. And so what that is people go to a lawyer to get coached on how to best present their case. But again, PowerSwitch has a part because it takes care of that evidentiary piece. But then a lawyer can help you choose the pieces of that document that are relevant. So something that you would, might not know going into a self-represented situation in family court is that you're allowed a maximum of 40 pages in your affidavit. So that means you have to be very strategic about the evidence that you include. So I would argue that PowerSwitch lets you do that really efficiently.
That's another great side benefit. Wow. Where does this information go? So you get the app. So I've got the app. And then what happens after that? Like, where's it stored? Where does it go? How does it work, like from a user standpoint?
So from a user standpoint, you sign up for an account, you put in your contact information, so your phone number and email address, and then you put in the phone number and email address or addresses. If it's somebody who contacts you by multiple phone numbers or emails, you can put as many we call them a sender. You can have as many senders as you want. As I said, maybe it's a scenario where there's multiple family members who you want to collect that conversation from. And then you hit start. It's a bit different for Android. On Android, it's all on device. It collects right off the phone. For iPhone, people will require a laptop or a desktop to back their phone up to. And that's just the nature of the iPhone operating system. And then you can choose a date range. So maybe you only want the conversations from like January to today. You can just select that date range and it'll pull a PDF for you of that. in terms of where it's stored, it's on an Amazon store, an Amazon cloud storage. And it's all encrypted in transit and, recognizing that it's sensitive data that we're collecting.
I was wondering, wow, incredible.
Sounds like PowerSwitch could also be used not only just in divorce, but in abuse cases, in situations where there's just conflict in general, especially if you want it to, whether before entering litigation, or even like how you were saying earlier, afterwards as well.
Yeah. So we say it's a dispute resolution tool because it's really an objective source of truth. It's like there is no more he said, she said, or he said, or she said, she said. It's just what's objectively transpired. So the answer is yes, Andrew. Really, in any kind of conflict, and even outside of the family space, like you had a disagreement with your neighbor, you had an understanding about, I don't know.
You could probably use it at work too. I mean, if you have a difficult boss or something, and maybe you're at a level where you're contacting each other with either, I imagine it would probably include work emails and work phones as well. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to try to show a superior a track record of poor leadership behavior or poor behavior in general.
Yeah, and in fact, that is a use case that we've had, is, to your point, sort of poor or mismanagement, poor leadership or mismanagement or harassment. Mm-hmm. Right? All of a sudden you have this very tidy document that you can take into HR to make, again, it's not you saying that it's happened, but you have this objective document to validate your claims.
Amazing. I mean, I guess you don't know what you don't know. So what's some top advice or top insights that you might like to share with women in conflict or anyone in conflict, divorce or otherwise, since you deal in conflict yourself?
Top advice on how to deal with conflict. Well, this is not very original, but I would say really everyone needs good therapeutic support in their lives. So whatever that looks like for people. But often, especially in sort of the early days, but not exclusively, I think people lean a lot on their lawyers. And that's a mistake because lawyers are not trained to manage your psychological health. The other thing is they don't care. They are about what's legally sort of out of bounds. And you're paying them $300, $400, $500 an hour to listen to you be sad or be outraged, A, and B, they're not equipped to help you process that. So for half of that, for $200 an hour, you can go and get a professional who deeply cares about your outrage and your sadness and who is trained to help you process it in a healthy way. So I do think that that's, and recognizing that not everybody can afford that, but, and if you can't, then even a girlfriend or a sister, or like to not spend that $500 an hour. Don't spend your outrage on your lawyer. Don't pay them to listen to that. It's not money well spent.
That's
No, it's definitely true. It's one thing that Barbara and I have talked about where, lawyers are not social workers, and at the end of the day, they always get paid.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? Honestly, it's like, if you have a really good one, they feel badly for you, but mostly your mental health is not their problem. So they don't care, So if you can find somebody who does care, that's better for you, and it's better for your pocketbook, and it's ultimately better for them too.
so, okay. So Another way you can save money, save time, get better digital evidence, take back your control. What are some other upsides of just downloading PowerSwitch right now, and if you're in a high conflict situation?
You know, really, I think and this is something that I experienced, and it's something that we hear all the time from customers, is really the sense of relief and safety in knowing that you have a year, 2 years, like you've got it captured and you have it on your, you know, living on your computer, or you filed it into the drive or whatever. Just knowing that you have it if and when you need it is a massive gift, really, to yourself. And in Alberta, the law is, if you feel you've been criminally harassed, whether that's by an ex or anywhere, to Andrew's point, you have up to 2 years to lay charges. So this was a change in the law that happened a few years ago. And it was really legislators recognizing that sometimes when you're in it, you don't have any perspective because you're just soaking in it. And you know, as humans, we're infinitely adaptable. And so we just keep adapting to this sort of abusive situation until we don't. And sometimes when you're out of it, it takes you a while to recognize what that was exactly. And so in Alberta, you have up to 2 years. So if you have a PowerSwitch report, it's just there as sort of a backstop if at some point you wanted to do something with it. Or alternately, if your high conflict person wants to challenge you, you have it. So that if you lose your phone or drop it in the toilet or whatever happens, it's like you have all of your stuff.
That would bring a sense of calm and safety and to your mindset.
And it just frees you from being a constant evidence collector, right? Because I have been there. You're just a full-time evidence collector. This is what I do.
Yeah,
right? I parent, I work, and I collect evidence, like when it's coming at volume. So this sort of crosses that off the list.
Wow, the lawyers can do what the lawyers need to do, and you get to do other stuff besides organizing evidence or taking screenshots.
Yeah, and of all the things in the world that I want to spend money on, I promise you, it's not paying a paralegal to stack up my screenshots and emails. That is $5,000 or $10,000. I do not want to spend.
I think, you know, families want to spend their money on other things like their kids, like their children, rather than on legal bills. So devastating.
Yes.
So this is making me kind of curious, and I'm just imagining someone watching this podcast. May I ask how much it is to get this app as a person?
Yeah. So right now, for iPhone, because it's still relatively new, we're still offering it for free, which is bananas. Yeah. Yeah. So, but like I say, if you have an iPhone, you will need to back your phone up to a laptop or a desktop. Now, here's the thing that really, I think, sets us apart is our customer service. So there are other text extractors that just will pull your text messages, for example, on the market. Everything out there for iPhone has the same challenge where you have to back it up to your laptop. And if you're not really technically literate, it can be really challenging. And most of those in our experience don't have any customer service. You're kind of out in the iPhone downloading wilderness. We will hop on a screen share with you, typically within hours of making a request, and we'll just make sure that you get what you need. So, so there's that. And for Android, it's $20 for 6 months. And again, that's just an introductory price. All of this pricing will change in the next 3 months. What we expect is that it will probably be like $120 a year, which is kind of similar to Our Family Wizard. And then you can sort of dip into PowerSwitch as often as you need within that year. So people typically, we're seeing them come back every kind of, some people are in there constantly, but most people are in every kind of quarter, I would say, just to top up their record.
Right.
Yeah, and 120 versus 10 grand. I mean,
no contest, right?
Yeah.
A no-brainer. Is such a super accessible tool.
Yeah.
Really, truly no-brainer. And so you can get it in Canada. How about in the United States?
Yeah. In fact, we've helped quite a lot of people in the United States, and even in other areas, like people in the US are using it to resolve issues in wills and estates, like other kind of family, where they've had some internal family dispute and they need to pull the communications around stuff, or landlord and tenant, or these kinds of things.
Yeah, that's another great possibility, with landlords and tenants, especially now. I mean, but
yeah, with respect to whatever the understanding was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. What did you call it? Conflict resolution tool?
Yeah.
Some beautiful.
Yeah, conflict resolution or dispute resolution. Yeah.
It's a very empowering tool. Yeah.
Right there in the name.
PowerSwitch.
And I have to explain, it's like the vowels aren't there because PowerSwitch with all the vowels was like trademarked by a bank. So we weren't going to be able to buy that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love the name. It's so, it says it all. The name truly does say it all.
I guess you were speaking about how like other competitors didn't, they would probably just pull just the text, you were saying. And what other things does PowerSwitch do that's even better than like the rest of the competition?
So the thing that really, other apps, because we're new, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the same level of functionality. And what I mean by that is like, we can't pull your WhatsApp or your Our Family Wizard messages or whatever. So other extractors have more functionality. So they can access WhatsApp and maybe Facebook Messenger or something. That's coming for us. So our intention is like WhatsApp will be the next piece that we collect, and probably Facebook Messenger. But the thing that really sets us apart is the aggregation. So we're doing text, email, and on Android, you can also get phone logs. So it's knitting it all together. So if it's you and I, Andrew, and we text and email, I'm not just pulling all of my emails and then pulling all of my text messages and then manually putting them together, because that's what you have to do now. PowerSwitch will sort of time sequence all of that simultaneously. And what we have heard again, and it's something particular to high conflict divorce or situations, is often a high conflict person I didn't have this experience, but we hear this often, will send you a question or something by text, and then you respond, and then they respond in an email, and then, right? So, and they're doing that intentionally to make it difficult to document or to track the conversation.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so we solve for that. And once we're collecting other channels, then like the same thing will be true.
Savvy. Amazing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because that, like you were saying earlier, it adds to the destabilization of the other party.
Yeah. Yep.
Big problem in our modern world today. These high conflict communications and high conflict divorces and high conflict people, we know they're on the rise. So I can only imagine you have quite a demand.
Bill Eddy says 30% or something, or no, 10%. 10% of the population is a high conflict personality. And so, like, I think of that in the context of they say 10% of the population has, is alcoholic or something. Like this is a big issue. Like these high conflict individuals are everywhere. And yeah.
Chances are you're going to run into one.
Right? If you're not in an intimate relationship with them, you might work with one, like Andrew says, or you might move next door to one, or you might have one in your family, right? Maybe it's a sibling or a parent or.
So very, very relevant, a very, very relevant app. So Carrie, before we wrap up, if I were to just invite you to imagine a very best outcome happening for one of your clients, what might that be? Very best outcome for someone going through a high conflict situation.
In the context of our platform?
Yeah.
The very best outcome would be, number one, just a sense of calm and safety and certainty around, okay, I have all of that. And that allows you to be more present in your life. This sense of being freed from being a full-time evidence collector and being sort of psychologically distracted by that sort of job. What that means is that you're able to engage more in the things that matter in your life, right? You're more present, I think, to your children. And when you're calmer and more settled, you're more present. So there's that. In terms of legal outcomes, the best would be that you saved thousands of dollars because you did this all yourself, and because you reviewed it all in advance and were able to highlight the stuff that your lawyer needed to look at rather than reading every single item. And then from there, you got maybe finally the outcomes that you wanted. So maybe that's supervised visitation. Maybe you needed to make a case for that, that your children needed supervised visitation with their parent, your co-parent. Maybe it's sole custody. Maybe it's a unilateral psych assessment. It's like maybe you can make the case based on the communications that your co-parent needs this. Like I think it's whatever your desired outcomes are, that PowerSwitch can help you achieve them. So a sense of calm and security, money savings, and then that you are able to actually validate what you know to be true with objective evidence.
Very powerful outcomes for people. Very powerful outcomes. Wow.
And I'm speaking from some experience here, right? I mean, like really recent experience even.
Yeah.
So when I think about ideal outcomes, I'm thinking about even my own situation here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You've walked the journey. Yeah. It's really relevant. Incredible.
But the best entrepreneurs know exactly what their clients are going through. So it's amazing how much you've helped people just in general with PowerSwitch, and it's going to be really exciting to see how PowerSwitch will change the game in the legal front in the years to come. So
that's our plan, and from your lips to
absolutely.
Yours, yeah.
Absolutely.
Very exciting.
Yeah, Carrie, is there anything that you would like to add, like last pearls of wisdom that you would want to throw out there for the audience listening before we wrap up today?
Around the app or around just sort of
just in general? I mean, whether it's from experience or even just using the app moving forward.
So just generally what I would say, and this is a huge challenge for those of us in a high conflict situation, there's two things. The first is that a high conflict communication strategist told me this years ago, and it changed everything for me. I just met her, and she anticipated everything that my ex was doing and was saying, almost verbatim. So I was amazed. But what I learned there is that high conflict people are kind of the same. It's like they've all read the script and they've read their part and they're playing it. And what was powerful about that, and this is what I want to tell people, is that it feels intensely personal because the abuse is very private and very personal, but it's actually not personal. It is not about you. It is entirely about them. And were it not you, it would be someone else. It actually isn't personal. That really freed me up because I thought if this person is like a character in a play, that means that there are strategies I can employ to just manage that personality type, not that person. And so I was able to, through the High Conflict Institute, learned a number of things around how to manage the personality type. And here's the second thing is we can't get too fixated on our problems with our high conflict person. And what I mean by that is where your attention goes, reality grows. And so if you're fixated on the problem, my experience is you get more problem. And so if we focus on where we want to be and what that looks like instead, I think we're better served. And again, this comes from some experience because I have done all the wrong things. So
we're feeling it. That is very powerful.
It's incredible. That first insight, especially, at least for me. I mean, that they're pretty much following the same script, and that the personality types are very similar. I mean, person to person, and how they treat other people is very similar.
Yeah. That was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that is
just a personality type. There are strategies to deal with them.
Yeah. Well, Carrie, if people wanted to reach out to you or learn more about PowerSwitch, what would be the best way to do so?
Well, people can get PowerSwitch. Right now, we're working on a Google authorization. So we are hopefully will be in the Play Store in the next few months. But right now, you get it from our website. So that's PwrSwitch.com. And there's a little Get PowerSwitch button there. You can download it for Android or iPhone. And if they wanted to get in touch with me personally, you can reach me by email, which I'm sure my address will be in the show notes.
All right, and that looks like it's all we have time for today. Once again, thank you for taking the time to be with us. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our channel, either on YouTube or through our podcast on the various podcast platforms. Don't forget to use the downloadable document below to help you and your loved ones deal with these challenges, learn how to document correctly, especially through all these high conflicts. And Barbara, if listeners wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way to do so?
BarbaraLapointe@gmail.com.
All righty. And if you'd like to email me, feel free to email me at startnow@andrewfolkler.com. As always, thank you for taking the time to be with us today at the Broken Families Podcast, where we discuss and help you find solutions to divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict relationships. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye.
All right.